Dennis watching us on YouTube in Bergenfield, New Jersey. Hey, Dennis, what's up?
Hey, Tom. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Back at you.
My question to you is, do you feel it's necessary to nationalize, have the government completely control and nationalize the largest banks in the United States? Or do you feel they should be private but regulated through Glass-Steagall, of course, and breaking up the biggest banks in the country?
I think having the government-owned banks is a mistake. And, without revisiting the election of 1832, I just think that banks are one of those categories of things where they should be either privately owned or the really good alternative to banks, and which is how I do my banking, is through a credit union. And
sure,
because they're local community agencies that you actually become an owner of as you put money into their bank.
And one question. If you were to break up the big banks, do you feel it would be wise to break them up by having them only operate in one state, or would you consider, of course you can do it through other ways, like splitting up J.P. Morgan Chase into an investment part, a wholesale bank for corporate clients, and a retail bank for insured deposits? So what way?
Yeah. Well, the latter is what you're describing is what Glass-Steagall was, Dennis, and I think that's an absolute necessary first step, period, regardless of anything else. In terms of breaking the banks up, it used to be that banks were largely regional or statewide businesses, and
they were only allowed to operate in one state.
Well, it wasn't just that they weren't allowed to. Each state has its own banking regulatory boards, and each state has its own rules about banks, and so it was just a hassle for banks to operate in more than one state. But as businesses became more trans-state, banks had to become more trans-state to meet their needs. And so now you've got, the big banks are operating pretty much, as far as I know, in every state. I'm not sure exactly what to do about that. And
so you don't feel the banks should be nationalized completely?
No, absolutely not. I think that there's an entire realm of business where it's not inappropriate to call for them to become worker-owned co-ops and things like that, essentially like credit unions are for banks, or member-owned co-ops.
What are the problems you see with nationalizing the banks? What would that be? Why would that be?
That they would be subject to political pressure. This is like right now you've got some agencies that are very large, very powerful, and have a lot of influence. The Securities and Exchange Commission. Well, actually, the SEC and the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, have both been highly politicized by the Republicans over the last decade and a half, to the point that the FEC is no longer prosecuting crimes that have to do with elections, which are largely overwhelmingly committed by Republicans. And the Securities and Exchange Commission, has for years now, Mary Jo White. I mean, we ran a campaign on this program to convince Mary Jo White that she should have a certain level of transparency among publicly traded companies, and no, they don't want that. We're not going to do that. So I'm just I'm just concerned about the politicization of banks. There's a lot of money there and a lot of power that comes along with it. Dennis, I got to move along, but thank you for the call. And also I think that there's we live in a mixed economy, a mixed economy. You've got the government sector, which is about 20 some odd percent of our economy, and you've got the private sector, which is the other 80%. And the private sector, I think, really should be private. It just shouldn't be so private that it becomes privileged enterprise, to paraphrase Franklin Roosevelt.